describe the species. Prisimantis in Greek means frogs from the highlands, and it is because this species and this genus reaches its peaks of diversity in the Andean slopes, western and eastern Andean slopes of South America. And Prisimantis is distributed all the way to Guyana, to northern Argentina. And as I said, the genus reaches its peaks of diversity in the mountain slopes of the Andes. And this figure over here show us these patterns of diversity specifically for Ecuador. So you can see how the peaks of diversity are reached in the montane forest. Something that I would like to mention here is that this pattern is also true for other amphibians, not only for Pristimantis. Another interesting thing is that these frogs are able to live over a very broad altitudinal range. So they can go from 0 meters above sea level to around 4,000 meters, and that would be like 13,000 feet, which is super high for a frog. And Pristimantis is a very interesting genus of frogs because they have many features that other frogs don't share. Like one of them is they are direct developers. That means that the entire development occurs within an egg. In other words, these frogs don't have tadpoles, and what you get when they hatch is mini adults, as you are going to see in this video. So what this trait does is releases these frogs from dependence on water sources. And it is hypothesized that this might be the cause for why this group is so diverse. Also, as I showed you before, there are other frogs within Pristimantis that are not only green or brown, as I showed you, but they are also very brightly colored. And usually brightly coloration is associated to patterns of aposematism that acts like a warning to predators, telling them like, look, I am poisonous, don't eat me, or I have spines, take care, like be careful about me. But we don't really know if these frogs have this coloration because they are toxic. So we still need to take a look at that in more detail. And another very interesting feature of Pristimantis is that they can even change their skin texture. This attribute has been only mentioned for octopuses and cuttlefish. So this is the very first terrestrial vertebrate to have that ability. And guess what? We still don't know why this happened, what are the physiological changes that occur for this to occur, and if it is adaptive or not. But, well, I decided to focus on answering a completely different question. So I wanted to take a look at the speciation and diversification rates associated to important geological events like the Andean orogeny. So what I did with Pristimantis is I sampled 3 different clades, and you can see the distribution of these clades in Ecuador. And here in this figure, color-coded, we can see red being lowland, to blue being highlands, or that is an ecosystem that we call páramo. We can see how these species are distributed in those altitudes. And what I did is I reconstructed the ancestral area that the ancestral population inhabited. And that is basically done using the current distribution patterns of species, and then through some statistical programs and phylogenetic analysis, we can get to get the most likely scenario where these species inhabited. However, if we, so here we can see the time scale that I use, because this tree is calibrated into time to be able to compare it with geological events. And you can see the time scale here. And these gray lines represent three major events of Andean orogeny occurring, one in the Miocene around 12 million years ago, another one in the Pliocene around 5 million years ago, and the last one that it is known for have accounted for the majority of the Andes altitude in the Pleistocene around 2.5 million years ago. And something that I would like to mention here is that this estimation represents a hypothesis, and they can vary depending on the methodology that it is used. For instance, some previous work have suggested that the Andes are older than what it has been reported, but based on our biological evidence, it seems like the Andes are not that old, or at least high altitude environments are not that old, because that's when these species colonized those areas. And here we can see the estimations of the speciation and extinction rates compared to altitude. And if we take a close look at this figure, we can see that the speciation curve proceeds at a steady rate, but it is not completely tied to the Andean orogeny. So that might mean that although Andes might have played an important role in increasing the diversification of these groups, the role that the Andes played on the speciation might be overrated, because we don't see peaks of speciation that follow the peaks of the geological events. And also my work showed that in spite of all of the taxonomic efforts, Pristhemantis is still full of undescribed species. In fact, during my work, I was able to describe these two species over here, Pristhemantis yanganati and Pristhemantis yanesi. And I have also participated in the description of these other species. This one was loudly described just last year, and it was named after one very well-known indigenous woman that worked for indigenous rights and education in indigenous communities. And I am currently working on the description of these two new species, but their names are top secret and I cannot tell you. And well, in this slide, I just wanted to show you that all my work wouldn't have been possible without the help of so many people and local people that taught me, helped me, and supported me throughout my research. This fieldwork that I'm showing you here took us 10 hours of walking, carrying everything with us, and camping in the middle of the forest for 2 weeks. So it was a very hard experience, but it was so worth it. Yeah, well, moving on into another project that I'm currently leading and working on, I would like to introduce you as Sicilian. So I would like to ask you if you can share in the chat, what do you think this animal is? So please write in the chat and we can discuss your answers later after I finish my presentation. But well, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what this is. This is an amphibian. And I know it doesn't look like, but it is actually a fossorial amphibian that spends almost all the time underground. And it can have, there are so many Sicilian species that it can go from tiny specimens to very large ones, as you can see here. But this is time for another confession. And I am only 5 feet tall. So this might not be very large, but it is a record within the Sicilians. And please don't get confused by these gnarly teeth. They are super nice. They barely, or I've never heard from someone being bitten by these animals. And they just use these teeth to grab slippery earthworm. So what we are trying to study with this group is the evolution of opsins. Opsins are proteins that allow us to see, and usually we have two different kind of visual cells that harbor different opsins. So we have rod cells that allow us to see in dim light, and cone cells that allow us to see in color. And one of the cone cells has LWS, that is the opsin that allows us to see in red. So for a very long time, scientists thought that Sicilians only had rods because they have to spend almost their entire life underground and they don't need to see in color. But something that our research is currently discovering is that they actually have LWS. And this is a very interesting result that we didn't expect. And it opens a lot of questions about what we actually know about the natural history of this group. Maybe they are getting out, maybe they are hunting outside of ground. And well, that is something that we still need to figure it out. So this is my hand holding a Sicilian, and this is a fieldwork that I did in December. So with this, we want to see if the gene is actually expressed in the eyes, because sometimes genes are in the genome, but they are not expressed, and we don't know if they are useful. And yeah, and we are trying to see if these genes are actually present in more species from the ones that we have. Something that my training didn't provide is the ability to be prepared for facing this. Going from beauty, diversity, life, to chaos, deforestation, and death. Yes, it is happening as we speak. While the world was in pause because of COVID, the destruction never stopped. This was the largest waterfall in Ecuador, and it died last year as a result of a poorly designed dam. Logging, mining, unsustainable agriculture, exploitation, and pet trade are among the most dangerous practices for the maintenance of biodiversity and therefore for our own survival. So we must include local people, communities, and children in our efforts of conservation. It is time to work together for the good of all life. I see conservation and education as my duty to society, and my pursuit of a scientific career and conservation efforts are highly motivated by a dedication to fostering a more inclusive and unbiased environment for the development of science and for including more minorities in STEM. So this is one of the projects that I'm currently working on as a conservation project. I am partnering with Save the Paradise, that it is an organization that is looking to educate local people about their biodiversity and to preserve land in order to conserve very important areas in the Choco region. And we are currently working on developing these sort of figures that show which species are venomous, which are not, so people can get more familiarized on not to be afraid of all of the snake species around. And these are some pictures of my work with the community. And something that I really, really enjoyed is that usually girls are not associated to handling snakes, but actually there are the girls, the more brave ones, that are super eager to handle snakes and to learn about nature. So it was a very, very important and heart-touching experience. And yeah, finally, I wanted to mention why AAUW has completely changed my life. And it is because it gave me the opportunity to show to other people that women can do it, And my friends are wanted to share their voices with mine to thank you, AUW, for giving me this